Robert Berdella entered the world on January 31, 1949, in the small town of Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. He was the eldest son of Robert Andrew Berdella Sr, an employee at the Ford Motor Company, and Mary Louise Berdella, née Huffman. Born into a devout Roman Catholic household with Italian roots from his father's side and German and British ancestry from his mother's, Berdella grew up adhering to religious traditions, including regular attendance at Mass and religious education classes. From a young age, Berdella was marked by his intelligence, but also by his solitary nature. He was not one to play outside frequently or entertain friends at home. His early years were further complicated by a speech impediment and severe nearsightedness, for which he wore thick glasses since he was 5. He also grappled with high blood pressure, necessitating various medications. Unlike his younger brother Daniel, who was 7 years his junior and naturally athletic, Berdella showed little interest in sports or physical activities. This difference strained his relationship with his father, who held athletic prowess in high regard and often unfavorably compared Robert to his more sports-inclined younger brother. Unfortunately, this led to instances of physical and emotional abuse from his father, including beatings with a leather strap. In school, Berdella's academic performance was strong, yet his teachers often found him challenging due to his withdrawn nature and the fact that he was frequently bullied by classmates. This led to limited social interactions with his peers. During his adolescence, Berdella discovered his homosexuality, a realization he initially kept secret. Despite this self-awareness, he briefly had a girlfriend in his early teens, maintaining a facade of heterosexuality as he grappled with his true identity in private. During his mid-teens, Robert Berdella began to exhibit aggressive behavior, often coming across as rude and condescending, particularly towards women. His interests during this time expanded into cooking and art, where he developed a certain flair and showmanship. A pivotal moment in his life occurred on Christmas Day in 1965, when the Berdella family visited relatives in Kenton, Ohio. That evening, tragedy struck as Berdella's father suffered a heart attack and died at the young age of 39. Berdella, who had returned to Cuyahoga Falls alone, was informed of his father's death upon reaching home. This loss deeply affected Berdella, prompting him to seek comfort in his Catholic faith. He delved into reading about various religions, but this exploration led him to become increasingly cynical about religious beliefs in general. In the same year, Berdella watched the film adaptation of John Fowles's novel, The Collector. The film's narrative centered around a man who kidnaps a woman he is attracted to and keeps her captive in his basement, made a significant impact on Berdella. He later admitted that the film had left a lasting impression on him. Following his father's death, Berdella's mother remarried, a decision that Berdella met with deep resentment, perceiving it as a betrayal of his father's memory. This event led him to become more introverted. He delved deeper into solitary pursuits that he had enjoyed since childhood, such as painting, coin and stamp collecting, and writing to foreign pen pals. This correspondence with individuals from countries like Vietnam and Burma, who sent him stamps, photographs, and information about their cultures, fueled his growing fascination with primitive art, photographs, and antiques. This interest eventually culminated in Berdella opening his own antiques business in 1982. In 1967, after successfully completing his studies at Cuyahoga Falls High School, where he had demonstrated exceptional academic potential and had been part of an independent study program, due to his impressive grades, Robert Berdella made a significant life change. He moved to Kansas City, enrolling in the Kansas City Art Institute, CAI. With ambitions of eventually becoming a college professor, Berdella's initial year at CAI saw him as a focused and skilled student. However, his attitude shifted dramatically in his second year. He began to express a strong anti-authoritarian stance and fell into a group of students involved in drug use. Berdella not only started using drugs himself, but also began selling them for profit to other students. His behavior escalated to include alcohol abuse and disturbing acts of animal cruelty. On 2 known occasions, he committed acts of violence against animals, including the decapitation of a duck and conducting drug experiments on a dog, actions that he displayed in front of his peers. At 19, Berdella faced legal troubles when he was arrested for attempting to sell methamphetamine to an undercover police officer. He managed to secure his release by posting a $3,000 bond, which is roughly equivalent to about $25,600 in 2023. Berdella eventually pleaded guilty to this charge and received a 5-year suspended sentence. Only a month after this arrest, he and 2 other students were apprehended for possessing marijuana and LSD in Johnson County. Unable to post bond this time, Berdella spent 5 days in jail. The charges against him and 1 other student were eventually dropped due to insufficient evidence. In 1982, Robert Berdella took a significant step in expanding his antiques business by securing a booth at the Westport Flea Market. He named his store Bob's Bazaar, specializing in the sale and trade of primitive art, jewelry, and antiques. While the store sometimes turned a good monthly profit, the earnings were not always enough to cover his expenses. To supplement his income, Berdella resorted to occasionally stealing or scavenging items to sell at his booth, and also took in lodgers at his home. During his time at the flea market, Berdella crossed paths with Paul Howell, another merchant who ran a booth nearby. This connection led to Berdella's acquaintance with Howell's younger son, Jerry. Initially, Jerry and his friends mocked Berdella for his open homosexuality. However, as per Berdella's account, Jerry later confided that he and his friends sometimes engaged in male prostitution to earn money. By the early 1980s, Paul Howell had moved his business to a location near the intersection of 39th and Main Street, with his family residing in an apartment above the store. Berdella maintained a friendly relationship with the Howells, occasionally offering to help Jerry with minor legal troubles. By the summer of 1984, Jerry Howell had reached the age of 19. In 1982, Robert Berdella took a significant step in expanding his antiques business by securing a booth at the Westport Flea Market. He named his store Bob's Bazaar, specializing in the sale and trade of primitive art, jewelry, and antiques. While the store sometimes turned a good monthly profit, the earnings were not always enough to cover his expenses. To supplement his income, Berdella resorted to occasionally stealing or scavenging items to sell at his booth, and also took in lodgers at his home. During his time at the flea market, Berdella crossed paths with Paul Howell, another merchant who ran a booth nearby. This connection led to Berdella's acquaintance with Howell's younger son, Jerry. Initially, Jerry and his friends mocked Berdella for his open homosexuality. However, as per Berdella's account, Jerry later confided that he and his friends sometimes engaged in male prostitution to earn money. By the early 1980s, Paul Howell had moved his business to a location near the intersection of 39th and Main Street, with his family residing in an apartment above the store. Berdella maintained a friendly relationship with the Howells, occasionally offering to help Jerry with minor legal troubles. By the summer of 1984, Jerry Howell had reached the age of 19. The first known murder, attributed to Robert Berdella, occurred on July 5, 1984, with the victim being 19-year-old Jerry Howell. Berdella had offered to take Jerry to a dance contest in Merriam. On the way, Berdella administered alcohol, diazepam, and acipromazine to Jerry, both in his car and later at his residence, until Jerry lost consciousness. Berdella then sedated Jerry further with a strong tranquilizer and restrained him to his bed. Jerry was held captive on Berdella's bed for approximately 28 hours. During this ordeal, Berdella subjected him to continuous drugging, torture, sexual assault, and violation with objects, blatantly ignoring Jerry's questions about the reason for his mistreatment and his pleas for release. Berdella later stated that Jerry's death was either due to asphyxiation from vomiting or from the combined effects of the gag and drugs. After Jerry's death, Berdella attempted, albeit briefly, to revive him with cardiopulmonary resuscitation. He then moved Jerry's body to his basement, where he hung it over a large pot and made cuts in Jerry's inner elbows and jugular vein. He left the body in this position overnight, allowing the blood to drain. The next day, Berdella dismembered Jerry's body with a chainsaw and knives, wrapping the parts in newspaper and trash bag, which he then placed in larger bags for garbage disposal. When questioned by police about Jerry's disappearance, Berdella maintained that he had taken Jerry to Merriam as agreed, and that they had separated near Jerry's destination.
Mr. Berdella, you're sitting here as a man who's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. You've confessed to murder of 6 young men in this city and crimes that horrified the city and much of the country. You've confessed to in various degrees, felonious restraint, drugging people, sexually abusing them, torturing them, killing them, dismembering them. And until now, you've refused all interviews. So in light of all those facts, I have to ask you, why are you here? What is it you have to say to us? What is it you want to say about yourself in this case?
He claimed to have had no contact with Jerry after that, consistent with his pattern in subsequent murders. Berdella meticulously recorded each act of sexual and physical torture he inflicted on Jerry. He ignored or taunted Jerry's repeated pleas for the abuse to stop. Berdella insisted to investigators that his actions were not about deriving pleasure, but were for what he described as his physical and mental satisfaction.
Well, I've had the media clamoring to get interviews with me. And after I made my last pleas, I wanted to get at least part of my side of it out. Is no separate from the way I treated my victims. I treated them as something less than human. Nothing more than a play toy or a play object.
Your prosecutors, and I do want to quote this, when you came to plead, called your crimes wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman.
When was this now?
I believe in documents associated with the Sheldon charges. To repeat that quote from the prosecution, these crimes were wantonly vile, horrible, or inhuman.
Okay. I think if you check with just about any attorney, you'll find that that is the standard clause that's used when they went to build a case for Capital One with the death penalty.
On April 10, 1985, Robert Sheldon, a 20-year-old former lodger, unexpectedly showed up at Berdella's home, seeking a place to stay temporarily. Berdella, who found Sheldon an annoyance despite his timely rent payments, chose to incapacitate and confine him after coming home to find Sheldon drunk. Berdella claimed he harbored no specific animosity toward Sheldon, but saw him as an outlet to vent his anger and frustration accumulated from other aspects of his life. Over 3 days, Sheldon was subjected to horrifying torture in Berdella's second-floor bedroom. This included having drain cleaner swabbed in his left eye, needles inserted under his fingertips, his wrists bound with piano wire to damage his hand nerves, and caulking used to impair his hearing. On April 15, the situation escalated when a workman arrived to perform maintenance on Berdella's house. To avoid detection, Berdella fatally suffocated Sheldon by covering his head with a sack and securing it with a rope. He later dismembered Sheldon's body in his third-floor bathroom. In June of that year, Berdella encountered Mark Wallace, who he recognized from previous yard work assistants, hiding in his tool shed during a severe thunderstorm. Inviting Wallace inside, Berdella noticed his agitated state and offered to inject him with chlorpromazine, claiming it would help him relax. Wallace, in his distressed state, agreed. After drugging Wallace, Berdella decided to hold him captive. Wallace endured close to a day of relentless torture, including electric shocks delivered through alligator clips attached to his nipples. Berdella also experimented with hypodermic needles, inserting them into various muscles in Wallace's back. According to Berdella, Wallace's death resulted from a lethal combination of drugs, gag, induced suffocation, and oxygen deprivation. He recorded Wallace's death at 7:00 p.m. on June 23, noting the specifics of his experimentation and its fatal outcome. On September 26, 1985, Robert Berdella received a call from James Ferris, an acquaintance who asked to stay at Berdella's house for a short period. Berdella agreed, planning to kidnap Ferris, whom he met at a bar that evening. Despite his brutal treatment of previous victims, Berdella claimed that Ferris was the first victim he intentionally tortured. He also admitted to investigators that he sometimes stopped updating his abuse logs, assuming that the victim would not survive much longer. Ferris was drugged with tranquilizers hidden in food and tied to Berdella's bed, where he was subjected to continuous torture for about 27 hours. This included electric shocks to his shoulder and testicles and acupuncture, with hypodermic needles. Ferris eventually became delirious, but Berdella persisted with his assaults. Berdella's log noted Ferris's deteriorating condition, finally recording his death with the term 86, indicating an end to his life. Todd Stoops, a 23-year-old drug addict and occasional prostitute, had previously lived briefly at Berdella's home. After a chance encounter in June 1986, Berdella invited Stoops to his house, offering food and implying the possibility of paid sex. Stoops, needing money for drugs, accepted. Berdella found Stoops particularly attractive and kept him captive for 2 weeks, subjecting him to increasingly severe torture to transform him into a compliant sex slave. This included electrical shocks and injections of drain clean. Stoops once requested food and drink, only to be denied by Berdella, causing him to break down in tears. Berdella eventually caused a severe injury to Stoops, leading to continuous health deterioration. Stoops was so weakened that he couldn't breathe properly, and he died on July 1, 1986, from septic shock caused by the injury. In spring 1987, Berdella befriended 20-year-old Larry Wayne Pearson, who expressed interest in witchcraft and wizardry. Pearson later stayed at Berdella's house, performing chores as rent. Berdella initially had no plans to capture Pearson, but decided to do so after bailing him out of jail and observing his lack of effort in finding work. On June 23, after watching a movie and driving around, Pearson mentioned robbing gay men, prompting Berdella to finalize his decision to take him captive. That evening, Berdella drugged Pearson and moved him to the basement, where he was bound and subjected to various forms of torture. Pearson proved to be the most cooperative of Berdella's victims, enduring weeks of abuse. As a reward for his compliance, Berdella moved him to the second floor, assuring him of lesser pain if he continued to cooperate. However, after 6 weeks, Pearson bit Berdella severely during a sexual assault, leading to Berdella killing him. Pearson's body was dismembered, with his head initially stored in the freezer, before being buried in the backyard.
You recall we mentioned before that there were reports in the Westport flea market where you had your shop that people would say, oh yes, I do remember he had these strange smelling dishes of food, that he had bead bones. And later on there were speculations, at least in the community and in some aspects of the media, that the remains of your victim were somehow being transported and prepared as meals and prepared as jewelry in your shop.
I was quickly able to identify to the police the other dealers in that section of the market where we rotated potluck rather than eat the flea market food again. And that you could question any of these people, and they'd be able to tell you that the food was good. There was nothing suspect about the turkey or ham or beef that was in these dishes.
1 a.m. in the late hours of March 29, 1988, Robert Berdella kidnapped Christopher Bryson, a 22-year-old male engaged in prostitution, under the guise of paying him for sexual services. Once inside Berdella's residence, Bryson was rendered unconscious using an iron bar and then restrained to a bed. Berdella subjected him to brutal abuse and torture, similar to what he had inflicted on his previous victims. In a particularly cruel form of torment, Berdella repeatedly applied ammonia to Bryson's eyes, ominously reminding him to concentrate solely on you, me, and this house. After keeping Bryson captive for several days, Berdella communicated a deceptive sense of trust towards him. He expressed a readiness to discuss certain aspects of the abuse and torture, but firmly stated that the sexual abuse was non-negotiable. Berdella concluded this conversation with a grim warning, implying that previous victims had reached similar points of trust, but ultimately died due to their mistakes. On the third day of his captivity, Christopher Bryson succeeded in gaining Robert Berdella's trust to a point where he convinced Berdella to modify his restraints. Claiming the ties above his head were cutting off his circulation, Bryson persuaded Berdella to tie his hands in front of him after the sexual abuse session. Additionally, Bryson managed to convince Berdella to leave a TV on in the room with the remote control within his reach. When Berdella was away, Bryson, constantly contemplating escape, saw an opportunity when Berdella carelessly left a book of matches in the room. Taking advantage of Berdella's absence, he burned through his restraints. Barely clothed and wearing only a dog collar, Bryson made a daring escape by jumping from a second-floor window, injuring his foot in the process. He frantically ran towards a meter reader on the opposite side of the street, pleading for him to call the police. The meter reader assisted Bryson to a nearby house where the occupants called for help, and the police arrived shortly after. When questioned by the responding officers, Bryson initially claimed he had been hitchhiking when Berdella abducted him, subjecting him to 4 days of rape, torture, and confinement. He explained he had been tied to a bed in the house, continually sodomized, drugged, and even had his throat injected with drain cleaner to limit his ability to scream. The officers observed Bryson's physical state, noting his swollen red eyes and numerous scars and welts on his body. 2 officers were assigned to discreetly surveil Berdella's property, while Bryson was escorted to Menorah Medical Center by another officer. The 4th officer contacted the Kansas City Police Department to arrange for a formal search warrant for Berdella's residence. On the day Christopher Bryson managed to escape, police arrested Robert Berdella for his assault. Berdella refused entry to officers at his home, prompting the issuance of a search warrant. The investigation revealed a bedroom with burnt ropes tied to the bedposts, an electrical transformer connected to wires leading to the bed, and a tray with syringes, prescription drugs, and other items. The room also contained an iron pipe, ropes, and belts, with the bedposts showing signs of wear from restraints and struggle. Further search of Berdella's property at 4315 Charlotte Street uncovered a human skull in a closet and a decomposing head in the backyard. Investigators also found human vertebrae with marks from saws and knives in a hallway, and human teeth and envelopes. The presence of a blood-stained chainsaw, saws, and other tools suggested the dismemberment of bodies. The house also yielded a horrifying collection of over 300 Polaroid photographs and snapshots showing various men in life, death, and during torture. Additionally, detailed logs of torture and sexual abuse were found, along with news clippings about missing individuals, Jerry Howell and James Ferris, whose personal items were also discovered. A special task force of detectives was formed to delve into Berdella's background. They learned of his reputation among Kansas City's male hustlers for drugging, injecting, and torturing young men. Despite suspicion in previous disappearances and surveillance, solid evidence had been elusive. During questioning, Berdella admitted to his crimes, detailing the methods of torture he used on his victims, ranging from electrical shocks to physical mutilation. He described his victims as more than human once captured, with no remorse shown. He explained that his logs were shorthand for his actions and the victims' reactions. Berdella's arrest led to charges of restraint, assault, and multiple counts of forcible sodomy. Subsequent identification of victims' remains led to additional murder charges. Despite initial denials, Berdella eventually confessed in exchange for avoiding the death penalty, detailing his crimes and disposal of the bodies. Incarcerated at the Missouri State Penitentiary, Berdella attempted to portray himself as misunderstood and unfairly demonized. He complained about prison conditions and claimed medical neglect. In 1992, Berdella died of a heart attack in prison at the age of 43. The judge sarcastically commented on his death, reflecting the grim nature of his crimes and personality. Despite his claims, Berdella showed no remorse and referred to his victims as play toys.